Hello my lovelies, how are we all today? I hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome or welcome back to Trapped by Love. My name is Emma Carrington, and if you are interested in true crime and justice, you are in the right place. So I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button because we'd love to have you join us. That was weird. Sorry. I don't know why I did that. By way of disclaimer, we discuss cases involving domestic abuse and domestic homicide on this channel. So if this is not the kind of content you are looking for, I completely understand. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so if you're listening on any pod platform and ever want to see the images that go along with these cases, you can find us on YouTube at Trapped by Love. But wherever you are, please know that I appreciate you. Let's go ahead and get into today's case. Today we're going to be discussing the case of Katie Haley. Katie was born on the 26th of August 1988 in Victoria, Australia, to her mum Tanya and dad Chris. Katie was the eldest child. She has a sister Bianca and a brother Dylan. Katie was raised by her mum and stepdad Boyd. She was a typical eldest child. She was mature because she wasn't just the eldest in her own family, but also of her cousins as well. She was often around all adults. Her stepdad Boyd says that she was always smart and sassy. He goes on to say that you always knew when Katie came into a room. She didn't mean to make an entrance, but people always took notice. You just knew she was around. As she grew, she matured into a bright, beautiful, bubbly and brave young lady. She had a zest for life and was unstoppable, even when she suffered an injury to her spine in a car accident when she was around 19. She fought hard to recuperate and went straight back to work at the hairdressers. Her injury did leave her with osteoporosis though. In 2011, Katie, at the age of 23, gave birth to her first child. However, 3 years later, Katie and her partner, her son's father, separated, and Katie moved back home to live with her family. Shortly afterwards, Katie met a man named Shane Robertson, and before long, the pair began a relationship. Shane was a year younger than Katie and had 2 children with a former partner. He worked as a tradie, and this gave him a common ground with Katie's dad, who was also a hard-working tradesman. Shane moved in with Katie and her family. That there gives me pause. If he has to move in with her family, what value is he actually adding to her life? But her family do say that it seemed, at least initially, that he made Katie happy. In 2016, Katie found out she was pregnant, and so the couple moved into their own place in Diggers Rest. Her family were happy for her. From what they had seen, Shane treated her and her son well while they were all living together. What they didn't see was that Shane was slowly starting to control Katie. Initially, he would comment on Katie's Facebook friends and began dissuading her from befriending men, essentially isolating her from her social group. But it was in 2017 when the couple's daughter arrived that there came a swift shift. Instead of this being a happy addition to the household, the birth of his child seemed to unleash something in Shane. It began with his control becoming more evident. So evident that her family was beginning to see the signs. He would demand to know where she was at all times. He wanted to know who she was with and what she was doing. Then the accusations started. He began accusing Katie of cheating on him because, as anyone who has ever had a newborn knows, that is exactly what you're looking for, of course. And you have all the time in the world to go out looking for a spicy hookup. Sorry, the absurdity just inspires sass. Moving on. It was only a matter of months after the birth of her daughter that Katie went back to work. She took a job working with her sister at a tavern. This, of course, just brought forth more accusations of cheating. Shane would call her constantly while she was at work, accusing her of cheating with her co-workers. He would turn up while she was working and sit there watching her, glaring at her and anyone who dared to interact with her, whether they be co-workers or customers. Shane was harassing Katie incessantly. As soon as her shift ended, Shane was calling her, demanding that she come straight home. But the control and harassment didn't stop there. Shane would read Katie's messages, access her social media accounts, and question her about every interaction he found. Like when Katie had given her co-worker Nathan a lift home from work when his car had broken down. After learning of this, Shane lost it. He was constantly carrying on about the fact that she didn't love him because she posted more photos of the kids on Facebook than of him. Seriously, dude? Get a grip. She's a mum. I'm not big on putting my daughter on Facebook, but it's pretty commonplace for mums to show off pictures of their kids on social media. But Katie's family say it was like he was jealous of his own daughter and the attention she was receiving from Katie. Boyd says, quote, "It just seemed to be that he had his nose put out of joint because he wasn't either the focus of attention or he wasn't getting enough attention," end quote. Bianca, Katie's sister, recalls, quote, "If she was active on social media and if she hadn't communicated with him, he would harass her relentlessly by texting or calling," end quote. Katie had to be on the phone to Shane from the moment she left home until arriving at work, and then immediately after signing off from work. Shane ended up making a number of fake social media accounts to try to make contact with her co-workers and friends to bait them into giving him the dirt on Katie. He would instigate chats with her friends and co-workers from these fake accounts that imply that Katie was flirtatious and not to be trusted, trying to get them to admit that they thought Katie was attractive or to reveal that Katie was cheating on him. Can I just say here, if you're in a relationship and you feel that the person you are with is unfaithful and you can't trust them, no matter how many times they reassure you, this may not be the relationship for you. Or if you are with someone who will not listen when you reassure them time and again that you're not unfaithful and you are in fact not cheating on them in any way, this may not be the relationship for you. Trust is the cornerstone of any relationship, and if it's not there and there doesn't seem to be any way of building it, the relationship is not healthy. Why would you want to be with someone you don't trust? That's just my 2 cents. It seems this is just how Katie began feeling. She started telling her family bits and pieces of what was happening with Shane, and a number of times confided that she wanted to leave him. But like so many people, she was hesitant to have her daughter also be from a broken home. I know I just had a rant, but in my opinion, it's so much better for a child to be from a broken home than to live in one. Okay, I'll put the soapbox away now, I promise. The ideal of keeping the family together is the reason so many victims of domestic abuse stay. And there's no doubt that what Katie was living with was domestic abuse. Shane also had no qualms about speaking openly with Katie's own family about his mistrust of her. He told her stepfather Boyd that he didn't know if he would ever be able to get over the feeling that Katie had cheated on him. Boyd tried to reassure Shane that Katie hadn't and wouldn't ever cheat on him. Boyd says, quote, "He just seemed to have lost control of reasoning. I spoke to him about being paranoid. I spoke to him about what he thought she was doing and how she couldn't when she was just exhausted from working and being a mother of a toddler," end quote. Boyd told him that they were adults and that they needed to work things out between themselves, that he wouldn't be getting involved in their relationship unless he was to learn that Shane had physically hurt Katie. Shane assured Boyd at this time that he had never laid a hand on Katie and that he never would. Unfortunately, only 6 days after this conversation, Katie was brutally attacked inside her Diggers Rest home. On the 9th of March 2018, Katie took her children to their grandparents and headed off to work. When she finished her shift, she returned to pick the children up and was already being inundated with calls from Shane, demanding to know where she was and why she wasn't home yet. Thinking returning home would calm the situation and stop the barrage of abuse she was copping, she did just that. She went home to try to appease her partner. This didn't stop the argument though. Things just continued to escalate. And it all came to a head when Katie told Shane that the relationship was over, that she couldn't do this anymore. She began to pack a bag and she actually left the home at one point for around half an hour. But when she returned to collect more of her belongings, Shane pleaded with her, begging her to stay. She relented and said she would, but that she would be sleeping in her son's room. At around 10:30 p.m, as Katie lay on her son's bed with her phone in her hand, obviously not feeling safe, Shane entered the room and violently beat Katie around the head and face with a 40-centimetre iron barbell. He struck her repeatedly, ultimately ending her life. All the while, the couple's 11-month-old baby girl lay sleeping in the next room. Once he had carried out this brutal and vicious beating, Shane called his mum and said, quote, "I've done it. I've bashed her brains in." He then fled the scene without calling emergency services. His mother called 000 at around 10:55 to send an ambulance to the home. Shane arrived shortly after at his mother's home with his daughter. When she told him that she'd called for an ambulance, he attempted to leave, but his brother-in-law had arrived and blocked the driveway with his vehicle, so Shane couldn't drive away. This didn't stop him though. He just proceeded to flee on foot. Katie's mum Tanya had seen a social media post about police vehicles in her daughter's street, so she tried in vain to contact Katie. She also tried to contact Shane, but neither of them were answering her calls or texts. Around midnight on March 9, Katie's parents got a call from the police about Shane and the fact that they were actually looking for him. After this call, her parents tried again to get in touch, just to let them know that the police were looking for him. Her parents weren't notified. They would only find out the terrible truth nearly 3 hours later, after a police media release that reported the body of a 29-year-old woman had been found, and after they took a trip to Katie's house to check on her. Boyd says, quote, "For an hour and a half before it, you have a gut feeling. You're sitting there, you drive down there feeling like no, and you just push it away and you go no, no. And the more you couldn't get them and the more you couldn't get an answer, you're just building up inside the anxiety and everything else. And then you walk into your son's room and go, look, we've got to get in the car. We think Shane's killed Katie." It's not a conversation that you generally have with your son at 2 o'clock in the morning. And you jump in the car and you drive down there and obviously you're speeding and it's just surreal. End quote. After the initial shock of arriving and finding out that it was, in fact, Katie, the family's mind immediately switched to their grandchild. When police finally caught Shane, he turned the blame on Katie, saying that she had been violent towards him. Shane was arrested and taken in for questioning. When investigators interviewed neighbours in the quiet street, they were told that they had heard loud arguing throughout the week, but hadn't heard anything during the attack. Shane Robertson was charged with Katie's murder and found guilty. He was sentenced in 2019 to 24 years with a non-parole period of 19 years, which does not seem nearly enough. Looking back, Bianca and Boyd say they can see all the signs of abuse. Hindsight's 20/20, right? And they wonder why they didn't recognise it before. All I can say is it comes down to a lack of education around healthy and unhealthy relationships. It's also the new territory of navigating boundaries when it comes to being able to contact someone and be contacted 24/7. Mobile phones are a wonderful thing, but if they're being used to control and monitor a person, they can be really dangerous. Bianca remembers that she and her sister had even laughed off the behaviour in strings of light-hearted messages they sent one another. She says, quote, "I can't believe that we had these conversations and we couldn't see the severity of what was happening. That's really alarming to me because we really downplayed it, Katie, and myself making jokes of it. She goes on to say, social media does not kill people. What kills people are the ways that people utilize it. It's incredibly important for anyone who feels like they are trapped in social media and on their phones by their partners to acknowledge that this type of abuse is domestic violence. Just because it's not physical doesn't mean that it's not a gateway to becoming physical or that it's not a gateway to more severe coercive control. The moment you feel uncomfortable, the moment something doesn't sit right, you need to feel comfortable enough to talk about it and acknowledge it for what it is, end quote. Bianca, offering advice to those who may be in a relationship where coercive control is present or friends with someone in this type of situation, says, quote, I think the biggest thing is to recognize when you feel uncomfortable or question their behavior. If you find yourself saying, that wasn't okay, or that doesn't seem right, don't dismiss those feelings. Don't put it down to what society has led you to believe about intimate relationships. When recognizing this behavior, whether in your own relationship or that of a friend, it's so important to be open, to encourage the conversation, to not allow yourself to become isolated. If you are in the relationship, talk to your friends and family. They will support you and work with you to leave safely. If you are the friend, don't give up on that person, especially if they aren't ready to recognize the type of relationship they are in. Be there for them and continue to support them, because when they do decide to leave, they need support to safely do it, end quote. And all of that is such valuable advice. I will also add that leaving, as is evident in this case, is often the most dangerous time. So contacting domestic abuse services to formulate a safety plan for leaving is really important, because quite often the first act of violence in a controlling relationship, again, just like in this case, is homicide. Bianca now speaks out regularly in an attempt to raise awareness around coercive control and the need for education about relationships. Bianca and Boyd were both featured in Jess Hill's documentary, See What You Made Me Do. Katie's story is also covered in Jess Hill's book of the same name. If you're interested in watching the documentary or reading the book, I will leave links, fabulous book. I will leave links in the description box below. But my sweet friends, that is all I have for you today. If the content in this case has raised any concerns for you regarding your own relationship or that of a loved one, please reach out for help. There is a list of resources in the show notes and the description box below. Please know that you're not alone. There is help out there. My aim in covering these cases is to honour the victims of these crimes and to get their stories out there in the hopes of warning others who may face similar situations. The hope is the more people who recognise the red flags and warning signs of abusive relationships, the less prevalent these cases will be in the future. Knowledge is power. I thank you again for joining me this week, and until next time, please take care of yourselves and be kind to one another. Bye.